So my name is Asim Afridi. I'm working as a Senior Director Solutions for a global system integrator and Microsoft Inner Circle member partner, HSO. I'm mainly responsible for North American clients. I'm based in Toronto area, Canada. A couple of fun facts about me. I love traveling, seeing new places. So another fun fact related to that, I've lived in Greater Seattle area, Auckland, Christchurch, Sydney, Dubai, among few cities where I spent some time. So as part of today's agenda for this session, I will get started with an introduction to project accounting and management basics. Then we'll obviously turn our page to overview of this module. What is the bigger horizontal picture? And then we'll be doing a little bit of deep dive into projects, contracts, billing, project manufacturing. And finally, as I mentioned, I will be available for any questions on this topic from your side. So let's get started with our core topic, that is Dynamics 365 F&O project management capabilities. So before we delve deep in this module, let's have a look at how any project goes through its life cycle or usual life cycle. So anywhere in the world we are dealing with the projects, first and foremost, the projects get initiated. A classical example of initiation phase activity will be when you do a scope of work for a project. So then the execution kicks in with activities being executed and completed, transactions happen, complete, and the project go in the progress and near completion. Obviously, there's an appetite for reports, running insights for the project. So when we look at the project management module within F&O, it is essentially the similar life cycle. So to get started, we really look at it from a perspective of how do we initiate a project. For example, how can we create and send project quotations to customers who require quotes, for instance, for projects, do statement of work, or even create project activities. All of these activities may be linked to project initiation phase. From there, we move on to project execution, which is really where we start to get into entering project expenses, entering transactions, activities kick in, and we may need to involve subcontractors in doing some parts of our projects. So an important point from a financial perspective, we often recognize revenues after the completion of a assigned set of activities. So we finally round this cycle off with analysis part. So the key with F&O is that a lot of analytics have been embedded into the system in the form of Power BI dashboards and or standard project reports and inquiries. So essentially in reporting, we are looking at data, we are looking at the project from a budget versus actual perspective, cost and profitability analysis, analyzing cash flows and whatnot. So let's explore project types supported in F&O. So there are 6 project types in F&O. So the first 2, time and material and fixed price projects, are the ones that can be invoiced out to a customer or your client. In time and material projects, the customer is billed for all costs that are incurred on a project. These costs may include in costs for hours, expenses, items, and fees. In fixed price projects, as the name suggests, it's a fixed price engagement negotiated with your customer. So the invoices consists of on-account transactions. A fixed price project is invoiced according to a billing schedule that is based on a project contract. So investment projects typically are used for long-term internal projects where the cost must be capitalized. So a good example is some long-term endeavor building assets where you are incurring costs which need to be capitalized later. Examples, a city building railroad infrastructure or buildings for city transit, for instance. So in investment projects, you can eliminate the cost out to a balance sheet item, typically fixed assets. Internal projects are used to track costs on a project that is internal to your organization. Internal projects can provide a good planning tool for managing your resource consumption, etc. Cost projects are typically used to track internal projects, and only hours, expenses, and items can be recorded on them. Unlike investment projects, cost projects cannot be capitalized to balance sheet items. Time projects, which is the last one mentioned here, are used to track time that is associated with non-chargeable and non-productive activities, such as sick time for workers on a project. So the transactions in time projects aren't posted to the ledger. So let's skim quickly through some of the core concepts related to project accounting and management module in F&O. So first and foremost, a project group defines the project types and types of accounts that project transactions are posted to. Every project must belong to a project group. Therefore, you must set up at least one project group when you are setting up project management and accounting module. So in the project posting profile form, you can define project postings at individual project level, project group level, or at categories level. So line properties is another important construct which controls essentially whether a project transaction is billable or non-billable, besides marking whether it's accrued or not. So line properties can also drive the markups for the sales prices. For instance, on a time and material project, project categories are actually main analytical groupings to categorize what a cost is about, right? So categories are of four types, or can be divided in four types of transactions: hours, items, expenses, and fees. So within those particular types, you can have different category groups to group together different similar types of costs. For example, salary-related categories, benefits, and whatnot, or expenses such as hotel or travel-related expenses. You can buckle them or group them in a similar category group. I have added my project management workspace, which is a default workspace in the system, to the favorites. And as you can see, this is my project management dashboard, where I have added some tiles myself, and there's an overview of for all the projects in process. There are some useful links at the right. So first and foremost, I will go about creating a new project and tell you how we can do that. So I want to create a new time and material project, for instance, for a retail, large retailer supplier, which builds, for example, some warehouses. So I will say warehouses project. I can select my project group I talked about. So this is my project group selected based on the type. I can go about selecting the project contract, which is already negotiated with the customer. So I will select this contract with Sparrow Retail. So this defaults my customer. I can enter my project manager. So I can select Ryan Capitana as my project manager, and I will say, okay, my start date for this particular project was 10th of August. So I will click on create project, and that will be creating our time and material project in the system. So first and foremost, currently, if you notice that the project stage is in create stage. So in order to book anything or go about doing any transaction on the project, we need to bring it in process or bring it in progress stage. So I have done that. Obviously, in the project overview phase, you can say I can just assign sales manager, project managers, program managers, projected dates, and actual dates for the project. I can go about putting details for scheduling of the project. So I will be selecting a scheduling calendar, for example, 24 hours. There are different tabs. I will not go into the details of all these tabs, but for instance, for budget and forecast, I can turn on the budget control for this particular project and say that I will be tracking some budgets on this project. I can also default some financial dimensions on this particular project. So I can go about defaulting some financial dimension values on this particular project so that when I create any transaction based on this project, these transactions will flow through. So that's a really quick sum up for the project creation. Obviously, in the plan tab, a lot of times we need to integrate our projects with some of the tools. So I can open my project in F&O directly and convert it in an MPP file to open it, to be able to open it in Microsoft Project. I can also review my work breakdown structure, WBS, build a comprehensive work breakdown structure consisting of different activities and sub-activities and all of those details. I can also go about managing the project and planning my project from a budgeting perspective and running some reports. So what we did shortly is created a project, brought it in progress, and reviewed some key details about that project. So moving on, journals like any other subledger module, are the entry point into the project accounting system. Journals are pretty much used always. So sometimes they are used at the background in projects based on the configurations and settings. So for example, when a timesheet is processed, it translates into an hour journal at the background. So we can do journals for transactions of types hours, expenses, fees, and beginning balances, as you can see on the screen. So beginning balance journals are typically used to upload opening balances for projects when you are migrating to Dynamics 365 F&O. So let's have a quick look in the system back and see how we can go about creating an expense journal, a really simple expense journal on the time and material project that we just created. So I will be heading back to my system. And since, let me head back to the project tab. And under journals, I can click on expense journal since I want to create an expense journal. Obviously, I'm creating this right now for the sake of demo for manually, but usually you will upload such journals via Excel add-in that you can upload projects or upload transactions through, right? So I have just created a journal. I will navigate to the lines, and I will say my activity, I only have one activity, so I'll select that. My category is travel, so this is a travel related expense journal. I will say my cost price was some travel related expense of $200. So that's my expense journal. As you can see, my sales price has been already defaulted based on the markup defined. My offset accounts have already been defaulted based on the posting profile that I've defined. So I will validate this journal quickly. And once this validates fine, I can go about, so that this looks okay. So I can go about posting this journal. So this is my simple expense journal that I've created on the project that I just created. And again, as I mentioned, we can also absolutely go about uploading these expense journals via Excel as well, because in an actual scenario, there might be hundreds of transactions that you may want to upload related to expenses, for instance, in a journal. So that's my expense journal. We just created an expense journal, posted it. Coming on to the next topic that I want to quickly circle around is, so just like any other subledger module, like AP or AR, where transactions affect GL postings, there is a posting profile table in projects as well, which controls for any type of project transactions, how these transactions will be done in GL. Or when it comes to GL. So these posting profiles, that is the GL accounts for various types of project transactions for different types of projects, can be defined at various levels. So we can define posting profiles for individual projects or project groups, or even for all projects. So I can define postings that apply on all projects. We can also define granularly these posting profiles for various levels of project categories, for each category or even for a particular category group. So that's really useful. Moving on to the next topic, which I want to quickly cover. More often in an actual project scenario, there are complexities that are suited better by having a project structure, or if I rephrase the term, maybe a project hierarchy, right? So for example, if we are doing a really large ERP implementation spanning over multiple years, you may gain more insights, the distinct phases of projects activities, and when they are split into separate sub-projects. So a project can be broken down to sub-projects, multiple levels if need be. There's no restriction. And a huge benefit of a project hierarchical structure is that you can mix and match different project types if you need to. So that's really powerful. Moving on to the next construct, which I wanted to include in our presentation, is project contract. So project contract is where the terms and conditions and one or more funders of the projects are presented. So a project contract can be cover multiple projects and many projects, such as you can do your reporting at the project contract level as well. So that's also possible. You can run a number of standard reports on the project contract level. So you can get all the project statements, project costs, complete project WIP reports on a project and contract level. So that's also powerful. Where I have added a tile for project contracts. So as you might recall, I used this Sparrow retail contract. So let's review some key details here. So as you can see, my project contract has a name, my sales currency, my invoice frequency, mostly how frequently I will invoice to this particular customer. What's the invoice template? What are the billing rules? Funding sources for this particular contract. That, for example, in this case, the funding type is customer. That is, I'll bill any invoices out to the customer, and similar details on the project contracts. As you can see, there's a control tab here on the project contract level, as I mentioned. So you can run a number of statements, standard project reports on the project contract level as well. The next topic is project billing. So firstly, only, as I mentioned before as well, only time and material projects and fixed price projects can be invoiced. So time and material projects and fixed price projects are always attached to a project contract. For fixed price project, the customer invoice amount is based on the invoice billing schedule. Invoicing is done through an on-account setup, which is also referred to as a billing schedule. And fixed price projects can be invoiced per project or per project contract. So time and material projects, the customer invoice amount is based on the transaction lines that are entered on the project. So transactions can be invoiced per project or per project contract. Before we do a customer invoice for a project, we can create a preliminary invoice as well, simply called invoice proposal. So in an invoice proposal, we select project transactions to include in a project invoice, etc. So just to recap here, there are following 3 ways in which we can do invoicing on the project. On account invoicing, as you can see on the deck, time and material projects and fixed price projects can be invoiced on account. Different types of on account setups are required for each project types. Invoicing in the periodic section. So through the periodic functions, transactions can be invoiced across projects. The periodic functions provide an overview of the transactions that must be invoiced or that are being included. And lastly, by using credit notes in the invoicing, a credit note can be created for both time and material and fixed price projects in case we need to issue any credits to the customers. I will be navigating to my project, which I just created, and I will be managing to create a new project invoice proposal for this particular project. So I will go about creating a new invoice proposal in this project. I can say, okay, my project ID is 189. As you can see, the expense transactions that we did a few minutes ago is included here for an amount of $230. So I will select this particular expense transaction that I want to include in my project invoice and say, okay. So this is me creating an invoice proposal, a preliminary invoice, as I explained to you. So I can go about saying expense billing, section and description, and I can go about either posting this particular invoice proposal and further printing as well. So I can further post this particular invoice proposal to post it as an actual project invoice and print it as well to be able to send it to my customers. So that's an overview of how we can go about creating an invoice proposal and on the project. For instance, here in this case, on a time and material project. So as you can see, we just created our invoice proposal and we saw options to maybe able to post it and further print it to be able to send it to the client. How and where we can use the project budget. So Dynamics 365 include project budgeting functionality within project management and accounting module. This helps companies monitor and control project revenue and expenditure. So by comparing budget and actuals, your organizations can reallocate money and resources to meet budgetary goals. So let's quickly review project budgets in F&O. So the first question you might have, when should I use the project budgeting or project budgets? Essentially, there are two types of budgets inside Dynamics 365. There's a cost budget and there's a revenue budget. So if you're looking to track costs or analyze costs or even regulate costs on a particular project, that's a good example of when you should use a project budget. And the same goes for the revenue side. In case you are tracking and budgeting revenues, forecasting revenues on a particular project, that's where you should be using the project budgets on the revenue side. So as an example, I know internally most consulting companies revenue budgets are done on all projects. So at least large ones, we make sure that we are tracking actual revenues versus the forecasted or the budgeted one. Another reason to use budget would be if you need an audit trail for your budget changes. For example, every time you create an original budget or revise the budget, the system is tracking that information for you when you have a project budget created in the system. Lastly, so there are some workflow controls around project budget approval. So you just don't create the budget and just allow it to go through. It actually has to go through an approval process and using workflows. So these are some core reasons why we should be using project budgeting. So some key facts about the project budgeting. First one, workflow is required. And the next thing is that obviously the forecast models are required. So you might need to configure some original and a remaining forecast model. So you must budget at the category level as well. That's really important for when it comes to project budgeting. So if you think back to the screenshot that I looked at the last slide, let me go back to it shortly. So you can see that we are putting the budgets at the category level. So that's really important. And the next point is that the project budgeting is independent of the GL budgeting. That's another separate module, but works with it at a high level. And the project budgeting is closely related to the forecast. So again, this is essentially defining that you can create a project budget and submit and approve it. And basically at the back end, it's using the forecasts. Let's have a quick look at this process flow of how things operate or proceed and when it comes to original budget. Obviously, when you create a project, you want to turn the budget tracking on, as we did on the project that we created. So you can create an original budget on that particular project. You can submit that through the workflow. Once it's approved, then the budget becomes an active budget on that particular project. So similar flow goes for the revision. So when the revision is created, revision is submitted through the workflow. Once it's approved, then the revision for any budget is active on your project. So you can go about importing project budgets using forecast or project transactions, even using WBS estimates. So all these options are available. When it comes to allocating project budgets, you can do it by quarter, by period, and you can mix and match what transactions do you want to, or what transaction types do you want to allocate. Do you want to allocate the budgets for all types across the period that you select by quarter or by periodic frequency, or you want to only allocate particular types of transactions and budgets related to particular types of transactions in your system. So that's really important now. So forecast. What really is a forecast? And so a forecast is essentially a method to project and control costs and revenues for a specific project. And this is very similar to project budgeting. But one key difference is that we don't have approval process when it comes to forecasts. So there's no workflow approval process associated with the forecast. Features and facts about the forecast. So when you are using the project forecast, you can enter forecast transactions in forecast forms for each transaction types. And every attribute that is available for an actual transaction can be used for a forecast transaction. For example, line profitability, line attributes, workers, descriptions. Project forecasting transactions are based on units and amounts. So they are driven by unit and amount. And each project forecast must be associated with a forecast model. So a forecast model, which is created in the forecast model form, acts as a container for the forecast transactions. So forecast models can be designated as submodels for a model as well, which allows you to forecast by regions, time periods, departments, etc. So also there's one-to-one relationship between a forecast and a model. So each forecast model makes up a separate budget for project. Forecast models can use forecast reduction as the control mechanism for projects. With forecast reduction, as the actual transactions happen, it reduces the forecast transactions balance. So in the plan tab, you can see I have this forecast section where I can go about creating hourly forecasts, expense forecasts, or other types of forecasts. So that's let me use this opportunity to maybe create a forecast transaction for expense forecast. So I will say this is my current forecast model. My project date is selected as on today's date. There's only one activity. My category can be travel related expenses, and my resource can be Julia. Sources. So that's an example of how I'm creating a travel-related forecast on my project, and I'm saying that maybe I will need to spend $1,000 in August for travel-related expenses on this particular project. So that's a good way to track my actual expenses when they happen. So that's how I will go about creating a forecast. As I mentioned, there's no workflow approval. You just simply create a forecast transaction. So that's so moving on to the next topic. This brings up us to the topic of project transactions. So in the project transactions, we may have some beginning balances for any projects which may be in progress as you implement those projects in Dynamics 365 F&O, or you migrate to Dynamics 365 F&O. So consider those as the opening balances. So then we have fees, items, hours, expenses as the main types of project transactions. And in the smaller red circles, there are types of other journals which indirectly go and feed into those transaction types. For example, in expenses, you can have project expenses, you can have AP invoice journal feeding into expenses and or your journal. For hours, you can have timesheets, project timesheets, or hour journals, as we discussed. For item-related transactions, though, you can have purchase orders for any purchases being done on the project, or in order to complete that project, if you need to do any purchases, and or you can create the sales orders as well if you are doing more so, more project manufacturing sort of thing in the system. So I can also go about creating our journal and I will not necessarily go into the details of that, but let me quickly highlight that how you can go about creating an hour journal, very similar to how we created expense journal. I can go into the hour journal and similarly create an hour journal transaction in a journal. So that's a very high level overview of different types of transactions and how they feed into different types of buckets when it comes to project transactions. So I want to highlight lastly that when we are looking at the project manufacturing, we'll just cover it really high level. So we'll review different types of different ways to create project production orders. So we can quickly take a look of the different posting methods as well, which are used for project production orders. So there are two methods of creating a project production order. So there's a direct method that you can go about creating a project from a production order and link it to a project. And then there's a indirect method. So this is where you can have an item requirement or a sales order that is tied directly to a particular project. And then from the sales order, you can actually shoot off a project production order, so which is an indirect link to the project. And the item requirements is the same functionality where you can create a production order, or you can have MRP pick up the item requirements and plan a production order. So those are just two ways or two methods that I wanted to walk through, just so that you know that there are more than one ways to create a production order that is related to a particular project. So I will quickly highlight that in the system as well. So let me go back to favorite that I have added here, project related production orders. You can find this link in the project module. So I will create a new production order. I will say maybe I'm doing a production of between speaker. Add these parameters. I will not change necessarily any of these facets. What I want to highlight is this project tab under when I'm creating a new production order. So I can create, select my project ID, for example, that, okay, this relates to my project ID 189. I will select my activity. And these are two posting methods for posting project related transactions when it comes to production orders. So there's finished item and there's consumed. Let's have a quick look at what these posting methods are and what they mean. So for finished items, um, uh, this is probably the most commonly used one. And basically what happens here is that when you end the production order, you will see the finished good as consumed to the production order at the full cost of what it took to produce it. The second one, consumed method, is you'll never see the finished good. So you will see the time and material that went into the finished good consumed to the project. So some more details towards each method that we just discussed. So the first one, finished item. Essentially, an item transaction or transactions are created as a production order is ended. So that that just means that you'll see that as finished good, not the actual components of the finished goods as consumed to the project. And this one's not recommended for long production cycles, because if you have long production cycles, for example, that last months or a year, who knows, you won't see the cost on the project until that's ended, right? So second one, which is the consume posting method, which basically here you are you consume material to your production order. So you will see that directly on the project, right? When you post the item picking journal, when you do that any item picking, our transactions, they are created as resource hours that are charged to the production order. So basically, if you post hours to the production order, you're going to see those hours, the hour cost directly on the project. And that this one's recommended for companies that with long production runs that need to recognize costs as they occur in the production cycle or in the production process. So that's at a high level, different types or different methods of production project production consumption, and the way you can consume items on a project-based production order. And we also covered how we can go about creating production orders that relate to a particular project. So moving on to the next topic is the project reporting and analytics in Dynamics 365 F&O. So for project reporting and analytics, you primarily have different bits available, standard out of the box inquiries, you have standard reports. Power BI analytics obviously is of great help, immense help. So on the control tab, which you are seeing on the screen as well of project, you have a number of inquiries available for the project review. For example, project statement, which provides a quick look at the progress of a particular project. The invoice control form provides an easy way to view both invoiced and non-invoiced transactions for time and material projects. The cash flow inquiry helps project managers obtain a better idea of cash flowing in from project invoices, sales orders, subscriptions, and fees. It also shows how cash flows out from the project purchase orders, item requirements, expenses, and hours. And the cost control inquiry, lastly, is designed so that project managers on long-term projects can track the cost of projects as it proceeds. So that's these are some key inquiries. There are some other inquiries as well: forecasts, transactions, resource scheduling, committed costs, which help you getting insights into the Dynamics 365 F&O projects. So just to recap what we did in our today's session. In today's session, we discussed project types, how we can go about creating contracts, even team a project. We discussed project planning aspects such as activities, forecasts, budget. We also covered project transactions, their types, and how to get about posting those to Ledger. So this sums up today's educational session on an overview of project management and accounting module. I would like to thank all of those who voted for this session and the whole team that aligned the logistics of this session at HSO and DynamicsCon. So let's open up Q&A time now. Thank you.